Everybody good? Like to call the work session to order. I'd like to table 2 through 6, and we can move to public comment. We have no public comment this time, so we'll move to athletics. Mr. Renzi.
Mr. Hansel, letter A, request approval to accept the resignation of middle school assistant football coach contingent upon being hired as middle school head football coach. With no questions or objectives, I'd like to place this on Wednesday's agenda, please.
We'll have this placed.
Letter B, request approval to accept the resignation of middle school assistant football coach contingent upon being hired as varsity assistant football coach. With no objections, questions, I'd like to have that placed on Wednesday's agenda.
Have that placed on the agenda.
Letter C, request approval of the following supplemental contracts for the 2022-2023 school year, contingent upon receipt of a signed contract no later than 1 month after issuance, including the posting of the position if the contingency is not met. We have 5 varsity football coaches, 1 middle school head football coach. With no questions or objectives, I'd like to have this placed on Wednesday's agenda.
Hearing none, we'll have this placed on the agenda.
And letter D, our volunteer coaches, request approval of the following volunteer coaches for varsity softball, another varsity softball, and middle school softball. And with no questions or objections, I'd like to have this placed on Wednesday's agenda, please.
Hearing none, we'll have that placed on the agenda.
Anything, Mrs. Martucci?
No, sir.
Anything, Mrs. Langston?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Manzella, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Renzi. Moving to buildings and grounds. Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Penzel. Request approval of the following event building use requests subject to adherence to the district's health and safety plan for all the applicable state and federal laws and orders, including any mandatory recommended cancellations, rescheduling, or postponement, and on the condition that requesters provide an event for the use-specific health and safety plan acceptable to the district. Any rescheduling or postponement shall be in the sole discretion of the district and under the terms and conditions as may be set forth by this district. And I'd like to spread 1 through 12 on those, please. No questions or objections, I'd like to place on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Request approval for the district to pay for the maintenance for the Olympic oak tree located at the Pocket Stadium. Estimated cost of $854 will be paid from the general fund. No questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
I have a question.
Question?
What is it? The tree's not dying or anything. So, I mean, is it just like the yearly maintenance thing that we're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just they do a little pruning and check it out and make sure everything's okay with it. Mr. Kirsch, do you have anything back to that?
No.
Thank you.
Okay,
Is that good?
I was worried.
Yep. Yep, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Request approval to purchase a zero-turn mower from Brewer at a cost of $10,079 to be paid from the capital reserve bond proceeds. And no questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
A question, please.
Question?
Where do we bought a tractor last May. Why do we need another one?
We actually need 3 of them, Mr. Mark.
3 of them. We never talked about them.
Township, and Minnesota.
I believe it was brought to the buildings and grounds, and that's the committee that brought this requisition to the board.
I understand that, but you know, we've got all these other unsolved problems we got in the district. We got the stadium out there needs painted. We got graduation coming up. We're going to be looking at another rust bucket. That's happening in June. We got the ceiling tile out of Dunmore Township. We got the trailer that hasn't been put done yet.
I think they talked to you about the ceiling tile. We're still waiting to make sure that the roof was okay.
There's no leaks. I was
Have
out there.
Oh, you've been out.
I've been out and looked. I asked.
So you're not
I
following,
asked.
so you're not following the committees. I guess we should do away with the committees if you've been dealing with the, let's see, it'd be Mr. Lake, Mr. Kokemeyer, and Mr. Martucci.
I think as a school director, I have a right to go out to any building I want to, anytime I want to. I also and get in touch with the principals and tell them there. And I ask them questions about their building.
Well, I believe that
I can do
when
that.
you were on the Buildings and Grounds Committee for the last 4 years.
No,
you're
no,
listed.
back up, 1 year, I was on there. You were on there for 3 years, I wasn't.
I was
for
on
a
there
year.
for 1 year. You were on
That's
there.
right, let's get it right.
But do you think you should be reporting to the committee? If
I
you talk
gave
to
the whole list that you asked me to last month, I gave that list to Dr. Bradley. I said, these are the things that our committee, when I was
Have
on
you
there
checked
for 1
back
year.
with the committee to
Excuse me,
see-
do you mind if
have
I
you
take a
checked-
second?
Have you checked back with the committee to see what's been done?
I
and how
gave the
it's
list to
progressed?
Dr. Bradley to give to the committee.
And have you checked with the committee?
Nah, forget it.
Please check with the
You don't
committee
want-
for Wednesday.
You don't want to get anything done.
Please check with the committee for the next.
Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Lake, we gave that list that Mr. Martrey collected. Mr. Martrey, the list that you did collect, and I thank you for that, it was comprehensive. That was given to the entire committee. I made copies and gave it to the committee and gave it to Scott as well. So it wasn't ignored, and I value your opinion, I do, and it was given to the entire committee for considerations.
No other questions or objections, we'll add that to the agenda.
Request approval of the following addition to the custodial substitute list for the 2021-22 school year. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Request approval to pay Cactc General Contracting Uniontown, PA for the repairs to the gas line located in the administration building in the amount of $6,955 to be paid by the Capital Reserve Fund. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
And there was a committee meeting that was held March 15, 2022 at 5 p.m. I have one more too. It is request approval of the acceptance of the proposal agreement of TRS Roofing Incorporated for the high school roof repair project with a base amount of $248,900 and the replacement of the blown-off repair area and existing edge metal in the high school roof section for the additional cost of $13,800 and $42,900 respectively, as requested for insurance claim with $262,700 paid from the insurance reimbursement and $42,900 from the capital reserve. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll have that placed on the agenda.
Mr. Martucci, you have anything? Yes, sir. Mr. Kokenair is on the line or no? Okay. Mr. Kirsch?
No, thank you.
That's all we have, Mr. Manzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Moving to Carnegie Free Library, Mr. Martret.
We have nothing at this time. Mrs. Shanks, do you have anything to add?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all we have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Martret. Moving to Connellsville Area Career and Technical Center, Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Manzella. Request approval to accept the Community Foundation of Fayette County's Innovative Educational Program Grant Award in the amount of $4,000 for the Connellsville Area Career and Technical Center to purchase materials from the STEM science course. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Request approval of the Cactc Automotive Adult Education class here entitled Commonwealth of PA Certified Inspection Mechanic. This course will be instructed by Mr. Travis Payne and will be conducted during the spring of 2022. Class location will be the Connellsville Area Career and Technical Center. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll have that placed on the agenda.
Carrie Detweiler and Amy Nicholson, staff, and approximately 23 students will be visiting students at Victoria College, Personal Care Home, Mount Pleasant, no cost to the district. The transportation will be paid by the group. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Eric DeChan, Richard Rosenstone, and approximately 9 culinary arts students will be visiting Westmoreland County Community College, April the 9th, 2022, at no cost to the district. And Trudy Nicholson, Eric DeChan, and Amy Nicholson staff, and approximately 45 students will be visiting Douglas Education Center Open House, April 22nd, 2022, at no cost to the district. And no questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none.
I'm sorry, I need to go back to number 1. There's no date on there. Do we have a date for that one?
think it's a grant, Margie. You know,
What?
I think we're receiving a grant.
To visit Susan's Victorian College.
11A, you talking?
It's 11C1. 11C1. Yeah, you're right.
There's no date on there.
Someone had dates in the audience.
April 13th. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry.
Good catch. Good catch.
All right, now, there was a committee meeting that was held March the 7th, 2022. Mrs. Sangston, do you have anything else?
Nothing. Thank you.
Mr. James? That's all we have, Mr. Manzella, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Moving to curriculum, Mr. Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. Request approval of the following professional employee travel. Eric Sheets, JROTC instructor, to attend the EMS Update Medical Conference, 7 Springs, March 24th, 25th, 26th, 2022, at no cost to the district. All costs will be paid by individual. No questions or objections. I'd like that placed on the agenda.
I have a question. The JROTC goes to the EMS update?
It's same acronym, different meaning. Right? Yes, I didn't see that.
It's my understanding that they teach it as part of the curriculum.
Check.
First aid?
They teach first aid, EMS?
Teaches first aid.
Okay. I was hearing no other questions or objections, we'll place that on the agenda.
That's all I have, Mr. Renzi.
I have nothing.
Dr. Coons. Okay, we have nothing, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harshman. Moving to cyber, Mr. Martre.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. We met on March 8th, 2022 at 3:30 p.m. and we decided at that time, went over various things. We're waiting for the course selections to be completed by the students. And then our next meeting will be on April the 13th, 2022. Mr. Mongel's on there, Dr. Stern's on there. Mr. Goetz, do you have anything to add?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Martre. Moving to federal programs, Mr. Martucci.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. Request approval to license Schoology Learning Management System from Power School Group LLC at a cost of $27,825 to be paid for from ARP ESSER funds. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on
Have a
one.
question?
Question?
How long is this for?
1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no other questions, we'll place this on the agenda.
And there was a committee meeting held March 11th, 2022 at 9 a.m. That's all I have. Mr. Mortre.
Nothing, thank you.
Dr. Coons?
I have nothing, thank you.
That's all, Mr. Panzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martucci. Moving to finance, Mr. Renzi.
Thank you, Mr. Manzella. Letter A, request approval of the budget transfers. No questions or objections, like that, are placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll place that on the agenda.
Letter B, request approval of the attached requisitions from February 19th, 2022 through March 18th, 2022, and to authorize the district business office to process purchase orders and payments. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda, please.
Have that placed on the agenda.
Letter C, request approval of the attached district credit card orders from February 19th, 2022 through March 18th, 2022, and to authorize district business office to process orders and payments. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll have that placed on the agenda.
Letter D, request approval of the health insurance rate increases through the Allegheny County Schools Health Insurance Consortium, effective July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 for the following plans: Community Blue Flex BPO 8%, Community Blue Flex BPO 8%, Standard Dental 3%, Davis Vision 3%. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Letter E, request approval to accept the following donations: AMVETS Ladies Auxiliary Post 103 Hopfoot to West Crawford Elementary School, 24 containers of disinfectant wipes, 134 bottles of hand sanitizer, and a monetary donation to the CAHS Musical Club for $2,913.60. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Letter F, request approval to donate old, unused band equipment to Godwin Catholic. With no questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Letter G, we had a committee meeting held on March 16th, 2022 at 10 a.m. Anything you want to add, Mr. Lake?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Heiseman?
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Robinson? That's all I have, Mr. Panzella.
Thank you, Mr. Renzi. Moving on to food service, Ms. Sangston.
Thank you. Request approval of the consulting agreement between Collins Area School District and Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, ASBO, for interim food service director. No objections or questions, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, we'll have that placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following addition to the cafeteria substitute list for 21-22 school year. No objections or questions, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Summer food hourly wage. Request approval to increase the summer food workers' hourly wage as follows. Site supervisor rate $11.92 and site worker rate $9.92. No objections or questions, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have. Mr. Martray?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sangston. Moving to personnel and review and liaison, Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. The following Family and Medical Leave Act is confirmed by the board. The teacher will take intermittent for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. Questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for a custodian to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for aide to take an intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, place that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for an aide to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for a truant officer to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
That will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for a monitor to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for a monitor to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for a teacher to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for an aide to take intermittent unpaid days for the remainder of the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the retirement of a cafeteria worker effective June 2nd, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the retirement of a cafeteria worker effective May the 31st, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the retirement of a purchasing manager effective June the 30th, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to accept the retirement of a teacher effective June the 1st, 2022. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following additions to the professional substitute list for the 21-22 school year: nurse, emergency, and prospective educator. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval of the following additions to the support professional substitute list for the 21-22 school year. No questions or objections, like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for the permanent contract of the following professional employee based on the completion of 3 years satisfactory service with Conesville Area School District. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for Antoinette Du, CAEA representative for the release time to attend PSCA function for 1/2 day on March 11th, 2022, with all costs reimbursed by the PSCA. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for purchasing and accounting specialist job description as attached in the post for the position. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Request approval to change the title Co-Director of Buildings and Grounds to the Director of Buildings and Grounds effective immediately. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Request approval for Margaret Rockwell, ESP, Regional Officer at Large, for the release time to attend the ESP Regional Leadership Workshops in the House of Delegates, April the 20th, 22nd, 2022, with the cost to be paid and reimbursed by the PSEA. No questions or objections like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Mr. Renzi, do you have anything to add?
I have nothing, Mr. Lake, thank you.
Mr. Harshman?
Nothing, thank you.
Dr. Bradley?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all we have this evening. Thanks, Mr. Panzo.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Moving on to policy and legislative, Mr. Martrek.
Thank you, Mr. Penzo. 18A, additional policies. Request approval of the following additional policies. The first reading was February 23rd, 2022, and we'll have 304.2, 404.2, and 504.2 on consensual relationships. No questions or objections. I'd like to have that on the agenda.
Hearing none, those will be placed on the agenda.
Mr. Harshman, you have anything additional?
Nothing, thank you.
Dr. Bradley?
Yes, Mr. Montre, thank you. There's a current piece of legislation working its way through the House of Representatives and a partner bill working through the Senate on new cyber and brick and mortar charter funding. Again, it's not advantageous to us as a brick and mortar public school district, so I encourage anybody local to contact your local legislators, members of the House of Representatives and Senate, and ask them to please vote against any current legislation for brick and mortar charter or cyber charter schools, and to adequately fund our district, that we have our own in-house cyber charter school that's equal to and or better than the cyber charter schools that exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. Thank you, Mr. Martre. Safety and security, Mr. Martucci.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. We have no agenda items at this time. Mr. Renzi.
I have nothing.
Mr. Pardak. Nothing at this time. That's all we have, Mr. Panzella.
Thank you, Mr. Martucci. Staying with you with special education.
Thank you again. Request approval of the adoption of Intermediate Unit 1 IDEA, Part B, policies and procedures as proposed, and with no questions or objections, I'll get that placed on Wednesday's agenda.
Hearing none, they'll be placed on the agenda.
And that's all I have. Mr. Lake.
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Sankster.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. D'Amico.
Nothing, thank you.
That's all, Mr. Panzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martucci. Moving to student services, Mrs. Sangston.
Thank you. Request approval for Nicholas D'Amico, Director of Special Education, to attend the virtual 44th Annual Pennsylvania Association of Pupil Services Administration Conference, which is PAPSA, April 7th through April 8th, 2022, at the cost of $249 for registration from the workshop mileage budget of $2,000, with $955 remaining after that. If questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Travel, request approval of the following travel. I'd like to go 1 through 10. No objections or questions, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, they will be placed on the agenda.
Request for Intermediate Union 1 to provide coordinated early intervention services for the 22-23 school year. No objections or questions, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that'll be placed on the agenda.
Request for the Collinsville School District to host the first annual Transition Career Fair. Soaring into your future on May 6th from 11 to 1, high school parking spaces in the back of the high school near the softball fields. A rain makeup day is scheduled for May 13th. Transitions Fair focus will be on employers, agency and support service, and education and training. Targeted audience is the high school students with special needs. Location is the Collinsville Early School parking lot. Dates are May 6, 22, Friday, or rain date is May 13, 22, which is a Friday. The hours are from 11 to 1. No objections or questions, I'd like that on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have. Mr. Harshman?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. D'Amico?
Nothing, thank you.
That's all we have, Mr. Pinzilla. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sankey. Moving to technology, Mr. Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. Alma, request approval to renew the Alma Student Information System for a term of 1 year at a cost of $48,297.50 to be paid from the 2022-23 technology software budget. No questions or objections, I'd like that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
22B, comply. Please request approval to license Compel from EduLink for a 3-year term at a cost of $35,390, total for a 3-year cost. To be paid for from the 21-22 technology software budget with a remaining balance of $4,806.55. No questions or objections, I'll make that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
22C, Drone Academy Supplies. Request approval to purchase 10 micro drone repair kits from the EMAX USA for High School Drone Academy at an approximate cost of $3,303.83 to be paid for from the 21-22 Technology General Supplies budget, with a remaining balance of $8,686.59. No questions or objections, I'll make that placed on the agenda.
Hearing none, that will be placed on the agenda.
That's all I have. Mr. Martucci.
No, sir.
Mr. Martray.
Nothing, thank you.
That's all. Mr. Ghost.
Nothing else, thank you.
All we have, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harshman. Moving to transportation, Mr. Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Panzella. We had a transportation committee meeting, was held on Monday, March the 7th, and the discussion was the cost of fuel. And Mr. Renzi, you have anything else?
No, I don't have nothing.
Mr. Evans?
One thing, Mr. Lake, just tonight I got some paperwork on 2 new drivers, so if we can add a new driver motion for Wednesday, I'll put all the details in there for tomorrow morning.
That's fine. That's all we have, Mr. Panzella. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Any public comment from knowledge items? None. Assistant to the superintendent comments? Nothing. All right, thank you. Superintendent comments?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pinzella. I apologize. I was sidebarring.
It's fine.
I'd like to take an opportunity to thank our transportation partner at Nelson Bus Lines under the leadership of Randy Richter for handling a recent safety incident involving disturbed student violations of our district student ridership code of conduct. During this unfortunate incident, our driver applied his training by reacting to an escalating disturbance by ultimately placing student safety first. Additionally, I would like to commend our school district security under our own security director, Mike Parlak, our director of transportation, Rich Evans, and the City of Collinsville Police for collaborating at the scene and subsequent follow-up in the determination of the filing of appropriate charges that were committed for any individual that committed institutional vandalism, disorderly conduct, or willful trespass on a public school bus. And we thank those parents that also reached out to us in an effort to make sure that our bus ridership goes within our norms and our code of conduct for bus ridership. So thank you for everyone involved, and we look forward to continuing with that bus route throughout the rest of the school year in a peaceful, calm, and safe manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bradley. And I agree 100%. Anything else?
No, thank you.
All right, motion to adjourn.